In my last video, I talked about the ups and downs of Capcom's Resident Evil 5, and to be honest, that game doesn't deserve as much hate as it gets. It was a standard third-person shooter that only competed with Call of Duty and the vibe of Call of Duty of the FPS age at the time. As I'm essentially going backwards as with the series, I ended up at the original remake of Resident Evil 1. I decided not to play the original one because, goodness gracious, this looks absolutely 379 billion years old, and there's no fear factor in it at all. Dog, like, why are the lights on? Come on, son. That's not good here at all. Like, but it's made in '96. It is what it is. Resident Evil 1 Remake, or RE1R, was a goddamn blockbuster compared to the original one. Surprisingly, for a 20-plus-year-old game, actually made me feel some type of way. I even had to stop playing it and install mods, which I'll unfortunately explain that later in the video. Do not make fun of me. Today we're going to be talking about why RE1R was and still is a superb ass game, the lore, the characters, the horror, the gameplay, and to simply state how the hell this 20-plus-year-old game has aged so very well. Roll the credits.
Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker, Resident Evil.
I want to start off by saying RE1 has such a solid introduction to the series. The game starts off on July 24th of 1998, just outside the town of Raccoon City, which the story continues in RE2. The story revolves around STARS and Special Tactics Rescue Service to investigate the murders and disappearances around the area. STARS was an operative services that consisted of ex-military to low-ranking of officers and officials. STARS Alpha Team was sent in as their Bravo team went missing and unresponsive. The team consisted of Barry Burton, Brad Vickers, Enrico Mardini, Joe Frost, Kenneth Sullivan, Richard Aiken, Chris Redfield, Rebecca Chambers, Jill Valentine, and Albert Wesker. Most of these bastards die early as in the game, and one super smart, conniving super soldier becomes one of the most notable and most popular characters ever created, straight out of the Matrix. That boy Albert Wesker. I'll come back to Albert Wesker in a bit, but before I move on, I wanted to say he's not the most fleshed out character. He's never has been, but that's kind of what makes him very intriguing. He's a man with a goal and ulterior motive, but why? Why stab his friends in the back and lead them to such a horrifying end? Well, you probably already know, but it makes sense that this video is a bit more entertaining for me to just go into the details of this, but you know, let's just continue. After Alpha Team locates the remnants of Bravo Team's chopper, they are suddenly attacked by a horde of rabid, mutated canines that look like the meat have been gnawed off the bone. Metal as fuck. They find refuge in an old abandoned mansion, later revealed to be the Spencer Mansion. This leads to the player, whether you choose Jill or Chris, which I'll talk more about in the gameplay, to find clues to figure out the mysteries of the mansion. This kind of player choice is seemingly dead in modern gaming, to be honest. On a hysterical note, this is when I noticed how bad Resident Evil 1's voice acting was. Listening to Barry and Jill first converse is like two AIs that were just coded and trying to figure out what speaking is. Along with the original, it's some of the worst voice acting I've personally ever heard. It's really bad. Like, it's terrible. Like, the original one sounds even worse because of the way it looks, but this one, because it looks better, it's more tolerable, but it's equally as terrible. It's really bad. Like, you gotta see.
What is this? Wow, what a mansion!
Captain Wesker, where's Chris?
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But Chris is...
What is it?
Maybe it's Chris. Now, Jill, can you go?
I'm going with you. Chris is our old partner, you know.
Okay, let me handle this. Stay alert.
Would you... Yeah, I can't. Oh my gosh, I'm done. With Chris's story, you eventually run into Alpha Team member Rebecca Chambers. With Jill, you recover the death mask to reveal information of Oswald Spencer, who you will eventually find out is the owner of the mansion, one of the founders of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. You have no idea how long it took me to actually say that the correct way when I was just, Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. Try saying that 10 times really fast. Discovering the progenitor virus, this virus becomes a T-virus, the main cause of the outbreak in the entire series. I go more into details about how we found this plant, Stairway of the Sun, in my Resident Evil 5 video, so definitely if you want to go back and find out how that came about, you want to go, definitely will watch that video. I'm just gonna I know the game gets an assload of hate, but I actually think it did a hell of a job wrapping up the storyline of this cast. Going back to Resident Evil 1, Jill overhears Barry speaking and somehow thinks he's talking to himself when she walks right into him. I don't know, like, she drops the ball on several situations in this game. Like, why is dude talking to himself? He got two different voices? Like, ma'am, you just aren't putting 2 and 2 together here. Like, there's this calculator, nothing's adding up. This is not right. Like, you dropping the ball. Chris and Jill eventually end up upon an underground laboratory, which becomes a trope in the series, little did we know. If you end up in some sort of hidden lab, secrets are now exposed. This is the end of the game. It's revealed that Umbrella has several subsidiaries and several industries and have manufactured consumer products that has a large international reach. Ada explains that their lab nest isn't really legally known and kept secret by corporate America, making Raccoon City an experiment territory of Umbrella. Can you imagine how big this issue would be in real life? Like, there will be a massive panic if like something like this actually happened in real life. Like, the government would try and have to keep this secret because people would go into a frenzy. There will be nothing would be the same ever again. It will be absolutely, like, grotesque, awful. Like, people would just be, I don't want to know. It's literally the apocalypse, zombie apocalypse, 100%, like, legitimate. Jill discovers that their madman is actually Albert Wesker, who is secretly working with Umbrella as she sets out to find them. Question in theory: can Wesker actually talk to zombies? I mean, maybe it's early stages of him taking the juice when he appears in RE5, but he's been navigating through these halls untouched, without any damage. Make it make sense to me. Like, who is he just navigating the zombies? He got like the super, like, he just teleport really fast, like he doesn't fire. As they escape to the helipad, they are attacked by the tyrant one last time, as Chris has the absolute dog shit slapped out of him. Brad drops the rocket launcher in the chopper and the tyrant is defeated. As you get a cute little love scene between these two, and unfortunately, nothing comes about from this at all. But, you know, realistically, let's be honest, man. Like, people have been shipping Jill and Chris for ages, man. They may as well just let it slide. So there are other bits and details of the story that we can probably go into, but the latter isn't required. The general whodunit horror mystery, as stated early, both characters have different cuts, but lead to the same conclusion. Rebecca's inclusion with Chris's storyline eventually leads to the prequel game Resident Evil 0, which goes through the events of Bravo Team. I haven't played 0 yet, but based on the gameplay, it invokes the same atmosphere and mood as the original RE1 remake. This leads me to something that I really couldn't wait to talk about in this video. I cannot tell you how creepy this game actually is. As I've played 4, 5, 7, Village, and currently playing through RE2, and right now I'll probably beat the game as I'm putting out this video, but it is what it is. I was not expecting this for a game that's made in 2002. This game is actually really fucking terrifying. Several factors made this game what it is. There is a creepy atmosphere that makes you feel as though someone, or rather something, is watching you from across the hall or the staircase. The fixed camera angles allow you to do less, allow you to see less, restricting your vision. A lot of the fixed camera angles had a special element which tilted shots that told you the story as you moved from hallway to corridor. The developers did a phenomenal job at keeping the player uneasy. Matter of fact, Remake is less outright scary and more eerie and nerve-wracking than anything. I feel though I was more afraid of what I could run into, and this kind of bothered me throughout the entire game. The perfect example of this is when I got into the guardhouse section of the game. Up until this point, I was getting fairly used to everything. No, look at me. Up until this point, I was fairly used to this game. I got used to every single thing. Every single kind of enemy at this point. I was good to go. I was all Gucci. Until they decided to put motherfucking spiders in this game? Why? Why? Everything up until this point was fantastic. I am extremely arachnophobic. I don't deal with spiders. I don't do it. I don't. No, ain't nobody fucking with spiders. Ain't nobody friends with spiders. The people who got freaking spiders as pets, get up out of here. People who like spiders, no. That's all good, but don't bring them around me. And the fact that these cats look that realistic in this game, I'm not gonna put it in this video because I had to get a mod to delete these cats. No. I quit this game for several days. There was a huge gap in the game in which I did these videos. The original video I recorded and this one was because of this specific problem in Resident Evil 1. Enemies in a zombie horror game, they decided to put these giant shit stain of a spider. And how does that even relate to the theme? Back in these older Resident Evil and horror games, they just decided to put big creatures that didn't even really remotely relate to the problem and task at hand. Why did you put gargantuan huge spiders in the game about zombies? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, I understand that stuff leaks places, maybe animals would have whatever stuff, but why would humans are getting bigger, but so why are the spiders randomly getting bigger? I was fed up and furious. I wasn't down with that. This is the fact that, like, this man Oswald Spencer had these spiders underneath his freaking mansion. Like, just, can you imagine? That is disgusting. That is horror nightmare fuel. No, you gotta burn the whole house. Even if they just not in the house, they too close. They might be on a ceiling underground, bro. I don't want that. We're calling it quits. We gotta burn the whole house down. We gotta burn the entire area. The entire area must be fumigated, flamed, nuked. It doesn't matter. Regardless of the whole situation, it's over. So he ended up installing a mod so I wouldn't have to come face to face with him. But it also completely canceled out the Black Tiger boss entirely. Thank you for the PC gods. Thank you for the PC gods. I know I might get some hate on this for installing the mods, but at the same time, I feel like I couldn't enjoy the game when it comes to these kinds of things. And it's safe to say Resident Evil has slowly become a favorite series of mine. Ironically, one of the mottos of the game is face your fears, and they literally took the most play on that. I hate it. Sticking to the horror elements, the sound design alone in this game was crucial to this masterpiece. The element of complete silence made portions unsettling. The sound of your own footsteps in utter silence gives you the feeling of isolation and vulnerability that having music can't produce. This is particularly an effective approach to sound design, as a completely absence of sound in itself is rather unsettling. Like, even if you're playing RE in your home alone with no AC or white noise, you hear a random sound as if someone may or may not be trying to break in. Along my research, I came across an interesting detail. Resident Evil was actually inspired from an old Famicom game, Sweet Home. Created by director Takeru Fujiwara, it was one of the original old school Japanese survival horror games that thrived off this element. Resident Evil's very camera angles and map might actually feel quite confusing to navigate, but the sound design helps make things a bit easier along with the distinctive visual design and color palette of each room. As you learn your way around, you'll start to remember locations in terms of sounds. The room with the ticking clock, the room with the cracking fire, the room where there is no sounds other than footsteps. Speaking of bases, the door opening cutscenes, which are actually the load screens, will consistently worry you. They also invoke a feeling of uncertainty. On the other side of this door, what am I expecting? Will I be okay? Always be prepared for what this game may or may not bring. The fact that many of the door sounds are mixed in such a way that they are very bassy and loud further emphasizes this. If you're going to break a silence, do it with a sound that has some real power behind it. This is even more obvious when it comes to the use of weapons in a game. Even the humble handgun Resident Evil has a piercing sound to it, and the way the bass-rich guns blasts echo down the hallways of the mansion gets the blood pumping, particularly if you're trying to hold off a powerful enemy like a hunter at the same time. In Resident Evil, music is used to deliver some sort of message to the player. Generally speaking, it's one of those several things. You are safe here. This is where you should be doing things. And you should have 3 minutes to live. That said, even the early games of the series aren't above subverting expectations by causing important things to occur in rooms with no music, or creating a deliberate sense of unease through a musical accompaniment, when in fact there is nothing actual of importance nearby. Lastly, and briefly, it isn't much to say the sound design in the enemies. The standard zombie sound, the standard zombie moans and sounds of hunters and Cerberus were among the ones that stood out, but the sound design was very effective more of how the game was played. Slow paced, and it's not like Jill and Chris are super soldiers or have special powers or anything, or even fast runners in the game. Resident Evil Remake was an exceptionally well-made game. Well, for the first original. I don't even want to continue to dunk on the original because it did set a blueprint. If the Godfather is beloved series, without the first one, we wouldn't have up to Resident Evil 8. We wouldn't have up to Village. So I can't really complain about this 96 classic, to be honest. Even if it was to be honest, every old game is gonna look kind of weird moving further and further into the future. Going back to the gameplay variations, there's a slight differences between Jill and Chris playthrough. Chris was obviously being the harder difficulty, and Jill masked as normal. Jill has 8 item slots while Chris has 6. Chris is faster and has more health, but Jill has more pocket space and better weapon variety. Chris's arc also places the greatest emphasis on Wesker, the game's chief antagonist, while featuring Rebecca Chambers as a key player. There is also different weapon factors that affect the gameplay and playstyles. For example, Chris has an additional weapon, the flash grenade, which is used as a last sort of resort of defense. Jill, on the other hand, has a stun gun, which can deal a lot of damage to enemies. Jill also has access to the grenade launcher. She can't get the flamethrower like Chris has access to. Strategy is vital in RE1. Constantly switching out your weapons and items that can be very powerful and useful, but opting not to use them and rather saving them for later is a difficult section in the game. I don't do any playthroughs or look through any information before I play any of these, so going through all of Resident Evil has been basically a complete roller coaster of a surprise for me. That's why the spiders existed, and I was like, I'm turning this game off. A lot of these new games, especially when I'm getting into a series, I actually don't look up anything of it. Like, maybe I'll look up maybe a few gameplay videos kind of expecting what I can expect, because games are older. I kind of want to know what are these tank controls going to be like. So that's kind of as much as kind of I can go. Maybe I'll watch like 10 minutes of gameplay. But a lot of the stuff as far as the story, I kind of don't really know. I kind of just go into it with an open mind. It's kind of just like shooting an arrow into the dark. I really don't know that much about it. So this series has been a huge roller coaster, as I just explained. I say this because saving is also decision heavy within this game. I wasn't expecting the ink ribbons to be a thing. They can be scarce depending on what rooms you go into and what you manage to be carrying in your item slots. I was not necessarily keen on going back and forth to the safe rooms for every single situation, but I definitely had to, more often near middle of the game. Playing it safe is really a key factor. I found myself consistently keeping the handgun and the extra weapon, mostly being the shotgun, as well as key items. Resident Evil's playstyle makes you as a player be very patient. This is not a very fast-paced, action-heavy game. It's very slow and can be very stressful at times. The style of play it puts you in, mixed with the horror elements, is an absolutely perfect mix that keeps you constantly on your toes. Unfortunately, this game doesn't tell you a damn thing. This is the most tedious, no clue, no hint ass game that I've ever probably played. Like, and I've played a good fair share of games that is very, like, you know, we don't tell you that much, but this game doesn't give you pretty much any clues. Like, you can read something and it may give you the most mundane, monotonous, like, clue for something, but Resident Evil 1 really doesn't tell you that much of anything. There can be an item that you have no idea what to use it for, and once you need it, you've completely forgotten about it. And because you've been busy with another task. Completing maps are easy, but however, with most games, I go by memory. Resident Evil 1, as far as I'm concerned, is seemingly a fever dream. There is so many parts moving in pieces within the walls of the Spencer Mansion that pretty much looks identical to the same room, the same portion, the same floor. As I said, you're kind of navigating toward a horror maze or within a horror maze. There are also points where you find more enemies and much stronger enemies and ones coming back to the past section, which will cause some hesitation for the player. I want to add that permanently burning your enemies is an efficient strategy, as they can respond and attack in numbers. This is beneficial for your health and ammo. Ammo is another thing that I want to talk about real briefly as I come close to the end of this video. The series has always had a focus on ammo and item conservation. There's a lot of things in this video that I keep stuttering my words, and I'm just like, hey, say this 5 times really fast, and I'm embarrassing myself. The handgun will be a bit seemingly useless when it comes to a few enemies. The game puts you in an element to adjust. It's not just run and shoot. It's always proceed with caution. I've played my fair share of survival horror games, even if it's just a slightly piece of them, but RE1 has an essence that I really don't think can be slightly replicated at all. And with my experiences being involved in lots of Resident Evil groups, maybe a few different ones on Facebook and a few different ones on Reddit, some people really much so say this. They've played every single existing Resident Evil game, at least most, and they can say Resident Evil 1 Remake is probably one of the best in the series, even if you do like or don't like tank controls. The story is very well, the gameplay is really well. I mean, mind you, someone who aren't really used to tank controls is going to be very complicated to adjust, but it's still a fun game. Did you enjoy the Resident Evil 1 Remake? Is it one of your favorites in the series? Let me know in the comments section down below. And lastly, be safe out there. Later, guys.
Jill, use it! Kill it, whatever it is!